So James, we should be now live on YouTube, hopefully, if you can see what I see.
Welcome to the 2020 Institute and Faculty of Actuaries Presidential Address, and the first time we are holding this event entirely virtually. There are almost 1,200 of you registered from all around the world viewing us on the Zoom facility, and more also watching on our YouTube channel. You are all most welcome. My name's Annette Spencer. I'm the Director of Public Affairs and Research at the IFoA, and I have the honour of introducing our new president today. Before I do that, let me share a few details about how you will be able to ask questions at today's session. You can ask questions throughout the presidential address, and we plan to leave some time in the second half of the session so that we can try and answer as many of them as we can. So to ask a question, you will need to have registered to be viewing us through the Zoom facility. And if you're in Zoom, we would ask that you send us your questions using the Q&A facility. We are not, for this session, going to be using the chat function or the raise hand function. So please use the Q&A facility. And if you haven't registered for Zoom and you're watching us on YouTube, then I'm afraid you won't be able to send us questions. So, turning to our new president. Tan Suee Chieh graduated from the London School of Economics and then worked for Prudential for 20 years, first in London and then in Malaysia and Singapore. After that, he worked for 6 years in the world of psychology to pursue his interest and passion in this subject, before returning to insurance as CEO of NTUC Income and then the NTUC Enterprise Group as a whole. He was elected to the IFoA's Council in 2017 and to the presidential team as president-elect last year. Ladies and gentlemen, the new president of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries.
Good afternoon from Singapore. I speak at a somber moment as a new president. It is obvious these are not normal times as we manage our way through a global crisis unlike any other. I hope that you and your families are safe and well. The COVID-19 crisis dislocated all our plans and took away what we did routinely only 4 months ago. Although we are not meeting in person today, in a surreal way, I feel more connected and closer to all of you. It took a virus to remind us poignantly that we are not only members of the IFoA, but more importantly, members of one human race. And Black Lives Matter inform us on how precarious our coherence is as one humanity. As a human race, we are struggling with insecurity, complexity, and uncertainty. The threats to our society are varied and growing. Our conventional operating assumptions have been shaken and challenged on many fronts. The COVID-19 crisis brings the issues which confront the IFoA as an organization and the relevance of our profession into sharp relief. It is a good time for us to reflect and question deeply what we stand for and why we are here as actuaries. As a body, we must seek solutions to society's most pressing problems. We must chart a path for our profession and for ourselves. And before I begin to chart that path, I will talk about who I am. I grew up in a small town called Semenge in Malaysia. When I was a young boy, I heard from older friends about the skills and influence of actuaries. Years later, at the age of 15, my maths teacher, Mr. Lau T of Kajang High School, suggested that I might want to become an actuary. As with many of you, this was how my journey to become an actuary began. I looked up to the then Institute of Actuaries as a beacon of thought leadership, the summit of professional and intellectual excellence, and as a foolproof conduit to success in the commercial world. I worked for Prudential Assurance for 20 years, from 1981 to 2001, and lived in the UK for 10 years. Names like Frank Reddington and Ronald Skerman, who were the illustrious chief actuaries of the Prudential and presidents of Institute of Actuaries, rang through the actuarial corridors in Holborn Bars, where I interned. I would regularly walk across to visit Staple Inn, talking to the people there, always browsing in the library and thumbing through the literature of the last 200 years. I was proud to be associated with the Institute of Actuaries. I was proud to be an actuary. I say all this because I want my newer British friends to know that I'm no stranger to the IFoA's place in British financial history and to our proud professional and intellectual traditions. And to tell all of you how dear all these traditions are in my heart. I speak not only as your first Asian president, for which I will be eternally proud, but I also speak as an old friend who has come back to visit you, to remind you how breathtaking your influence has been, how well respected you have been by governments and businesses throughout the world, and how you have inspired many generations of students in Asia and in Africa. And to tell you in all sincerity that I believe your best days are yet to come. When I became the CEO of Prudential Singapore in 1994, my role became less actuarial. As a result, I channeled my professional energies elsewhere. It was only in 2017, some 23 years later, when I retired from executive life, that I started volunteering for the IFoA again. The achievements of the IFoA over those 2 decades, especially in Asia and in my home countries, Malaysia and Singapore, were outstanding. Our conferences were impressive and student numbers were high. I want to pay tribute to the work done by the leaders and executives of the IFoA over these 2 decades. I campaigned successfully to join the council in 2017. I was delighted to be elected and to return to the heart of the profession I love. On my return, I found 3 things which concern me. Firstly, I saw that the voice and the authority of the membership of the profession did not seem to be as strong as they had been before. Secondly, the thought leadership and the influence of the profession in the UK have both declined significantly from my experience of 25 years ago. Thirdly, the governance in the IFoA was not working well, and this made it difficult for the council to exercise its strategic and stewardship roles effectively. Frankly, I was saddened by all this. This should not have happened, and we must not allow this to happen again. I was confident that something positive could come out of all this. That is why I decided to stand for the presidency to help lead this change. With this as a backdrop, I would like to begin by discussing the elements which will enable us to change and reinvent ourselves to become a more responsive organization and a more influential voice in this rapidly changing and increasingly uncertain world. If we want to see change in the world today, we must have the courage to make a new beginning. I want to make a call to all of us to make a new beginning. I campaigned to be a council member in 2017 and your president in 2019 on a platform of transformational change to enable the profession to thrive in a digital age. I believe this remains the IFoA's central task. The COVID-19 crisis offers us a burning platform to accelerate this change, to rethink how we want to operate the IFoA as a body, and how we want to educate and train our actuaries, and how we want to reposition the profession to have greater influence in the world. At council debates, I asserted that the reinvention of the profession would not happen if we did not transform the culture of the IFoA, because it is they who will have to execute our strategy. And the cultural transformation of the IFoA will not happen if the presidential team and the council do not offer the clarity of leadership, courage, and humanity in setting out a clear agenda for action and in reinventing our existing governance arrangements. The empowerment of the executive team is a critical enabler of their ownership and in the execution of our strategy. We need significant changes in the governance of the IFoA to one which is simpler, smarter, less costly, more responsive, and working in service of our membership and our strategy. Our current governance arrangements make it difficult to do anything quickly. The status quo does not work well in today's world. In many ways, the status quo reflects our nature as actuaries and the culture of the profession. We are too accurate, cautious, consistent, and reticent. And let me tell you, culture matters. Culture matters deeply. In fact, in a world of transformational change, culture is the only thing that really matters. Our reinvention is really about the cultural transformation of the profession. The traits and tendencies we have as actuaries are self-evident. We have many strengths, but as any psychologist will tell you, an overdeveloped strength is a weakness. Firstly, we are cautious and reticent, and that is important in many actuarial roles. But in many other areas, we must be more courageous, dynamic, and entrepreneurial. Secondly, we love accuracy and consistency, but too often we are weighed down by it. We must learn to accept an imperfect answer and move on. Speed is often as important in decision-making as accuracy, often more so. Thirdly, we often look to the past for guidance, but now more than ever, we must look to the future for our inspiration. Fourthly, we like to look inwards into our profession for solutions. However, we need to be more curious about the outside world and adopt a learning and growth mindset, because this is how we will discover the opportunities and solutions. Ultimately, we have to be bolder in our imagination on what is possible. These psychological and cultural characteristics were referred to time and again by presidents in their presidential addresses. Peter Clark in the year 2000, Jeremy Goffert in the year 2002, Nick Dumbrek in the year 2006, and Ronnie Bowie in his 2008 address to the Faculty of Actuaries said that we have to be bold and adopt a spirit of enterprise. Otherwise, we enter into a cycle of complacency, decline, and eventually irrelevance. And it is one of our greatest past presidents, Frank Reddington, arguably the greatest actuary in the last 100 years, who on the accepting of his gold medal in 1968 said, quote, "I do not think that the profession has any besetting vices, but I sometimes think that perhaps it has besetting virtues. As a profession, we are apt to be accurate, cautious, consistent, and reticent. And in these lies our strength. But if we do not leave enough room for impulse and imagination, they can be a weakness. The actuary who is only an actuary is not an actuary." Unquote. These are powerful words from one of our greatest intellectual forefathers. Let us, in this generation, respond to his call. Let us create room and welcome the new values alongside the old ones. The actuary who is only an actuary is not an actuary. In the last 15 minutes, I spoke more boldly and openly than I would have done had COVID-19 not happened. This is an opportunity for us to shape the future, not just to respond to it. We must imagine what is possible for the IFoA, the profession, and for us as actuaries. Recently, we have seen signs of change, which give me ground for hope. I give you two examples. The first example, bringing our exam-centered based exams online in April successfully was a singular most impressive achievement of the executive team. I have not seen anything like it in the last 3 years I've been on council. It shows what is possible if you have clarity of purpose, teamwork, motivation, and a deadline. The management board took the necessary risks to support it. Pre-COVID-19, this idea would not have survived the scrutiny by the management board, let alone the council. The exercise was completed within 2 months from the day the idea was first conceived. I applaud Stephen Mann and his executive team for achieving this. I strongly encourage the management board and the council to continue to give the executive team space so that they can exercise ownership, initiative, and deliver the strategy for the profession in a highly motivated fashion. This is what we need to do if the IFoA is to thrive in the digital age and in a future fraught with uncertainty and opportunity. Now, the second example. Recently, we have seen a new energy on our IFoA website, which is filled with topical webinars and curated content in the Pandemics Hub. The rapid setup of the COVID-19 Action Task Force, led by Louise Pryor and Colin DeKuitz, respond to the needs of our time. In a few short weeks, the task force has over 550 volunteers working on over 90 different work streams, all reflecting actuarial contributions to understanding the pandemic better. Along with this, the COVID-19 Actuaries Response Group, an informal community of 10 actuaries and medical specialists led by Stuart McDonald and Matthew Edwards, came into being outside the IFoA. They had a desire to learn and to share notes with the aim of helping fellow actuaries as well as a wider audience to understand and manage the unfolding COVID-19 crisis. They do not aim to duplicate nor rival the quality and rigor of work achieved by our official publications, but they do aim to be quick and responsive. So in effect, they are what Steve Jobs would call a skunk works group, doing the best they could outside the IFoA. The COVID-19 Actuaries Response Group have attracted 4,300 followers on LinkedIn and 3,400 followers on Twitter in the last 15 weeks. The engagement scores were extraordinarily high. They appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the Spectator magazine, the Financial Mail in South Africa, and in 4 insurance publications in the UK. The 42 bulletins produced by the Actuaries Response Group, as well as our highly respected CMI updates and publications, were universally praised. The combination of the work of the Actuaries Response Group and the IFoA's COVID-19 Action Task Force meant that IFoA actuaries as a group are seen as being able to move with speed, make impact in the social media, and also produce high quality and rigorous pronouncements with care and professionalism. This has caught the attention and approbation of many throughout the world. I would like to suggest that the IFoA's governance evolves quickly and act imaginatively to embrace the creation of such communities outside the IFoA. Let me say, if our system has too little diversity, experimentation, and adaptation, we will be trapped by complacency, groupthink, and rigidity. We must avoid this danger. We must create a culture where we place relevance and engagement alongside compliance and standards, speed and responsiveness alongside reverence for process, celebration of excellence and diversity alongside conformity. We must begin to think of ourselves as a network of communities with Staple Inn as our spiritual hub, supported by a proactive, responsive, and motivated executive team at Holborn Gate. In this regard, I am grateful to Graham Stott, the chair of our management board, who is leading energetically behind the scenes to alter our governance arrangements in support of this vision and in service of our membership and our strategy. I want to use my presidential term to ask all of us to go forward with courage and imagination, and not to go back to our old ways, to be more agile, to judge when to be loose later, and to create an ecology where our members are engaged and our leaders are engaging. Now I would like to talk about the DNA of an actuary, as I believe our DNA must be the fountainhead of the IFoA's new strategy. Many of us joined the profession because we were encouraged to do so by our teachers or career advisors. We were considered capable in mathematics in our school and university. We did not choose engineering, physics, or mathematics because we wanted to apply our skills in an organizational or a business setting. Above all, we wanted to be rewarded well, not just financially, but also by being given interesting problems to solve with our mathematics. So we work in life and general insurance companies, in pensions industry. We work in investments and banking, in digital startup companies, in data science and management consultancies. Our aims in all these jobs are to apply our mathematics in a practical setting and work in a place where we can enjoy a rewarding and fulfilling career. What unites us is this common DNA. It is not about life insurance, general insurance, or pensions. It is about using our mathematics to solve practical problems. This DNA is lucidly explained in Chris Dakin's presidential address in 1994. He said, our distinctiveness is applying mathematics, especially in a financial context. And he warned us that we must not be lured by the siren of generalism, lest we lose our distinctiveness. And he emphasized that we are not only mathematicians, we integrate various disciplines around mathematics, and we are members of a profession committed to communication, ethical standards, and the wider public interest. The new IFoA strategy brings to life what Frank Reddington said more than 50 years ago and what Chris Dakin said more than 25 years ago. The new IFoA strategy is our new narrative of how actuaries can make a difference in a digital age and in a future fraught with uncertainty and opportunity. The new IFoA strategy has 4 components: VSMD. Firstly, V is for vision of the IFoA actuary. S is for skill sets. M is for mindsets and the culture of the profession. And D is for domains. In the last 16 months, your council and executive team have worked hard with John Taylor, Louise Pryor, Jules Constantino, and me to create this narrative. In the V part of the VSMD strategy, we made the following 6 salient points regarding the vision of the IFoA actuary. 1. The digital revolution is transforming our economic landscape and our traditional domains. Our traditional roles alone in life and pensions will no longer be enough to secure our future as a profession. We owe to our members and to ourselves a redefinition of our capabilities so that we can navigate the emerging paradigms of the future with confidence. 2, most of our members still work in life and pensions in the UK, and in these fields, they play very prominent roles. Our expertise and reputation have largely depended on this group. The aim of the VSMD strategy is to make sure they and the generations who come after them can continue to thrive as the industrial landscapes they work in are redrawn. And we want to make it absolutely clear that they and the work they do today remain central to the IFoA. 3, new roles for actuaries in existing and new domains have arisen in the UK and elsewhere, and we must take advantage of this development. This is our opportunity to re-embrace and re-engage many people with our DNA back into the IFoA. This will help us create a diverse, exciting, global, and thriving profession and open up opportunities for all. 4, in line with our public duty, we must apply our actuarial skill sets more decisively, deliberately, and ambitiously to achieve the social impact goals of our time. For example, in climate change, aging, AI and ethics, economic and health security, and now more topically, epidemiology and the long-term consequences of pandemics. This will open up exciting vistas for our younger actuaries whose concerns are increasingly about social impact and making a positive difference in the world we live in. 5, our tradition and culture have conferred on all of us an enviable character and an essence which is uniquely the IFoA's. This character and essence speak to the high quality of our education, our reputation for sound business judgment, and the high ethical standards anchored in our beloved Actuaries Code. The VSMD strategies seek to protect and enhance this character and essence as we undergo our transformation. 6, what the VSMD strategy seeks to change is skill sets, and we seek a serious shift in mindset and the culture of our profession. And we also seek to embrace the many new domains where our collective DNA can thrive in. Now I come to S of the VSMD, denoting the skill sets of the profession. We need wider, more relevant and contemporary skill sets to tackle the opportunities made available by the digital revolution and the social impact challenges of our time. The VSMD strategy calls for two specific things on skill sets. Firstly, an extension of the current core syllabus and lifelong learning to embrace data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence comprehensively. Secondly, an education and training in new and relevant skill sets, which will enable our students and members to work increasingly in newer, diverse, and exciting fields. These skill sets are related to digital technologies, social platforms, behavioral sciences, and quantum leaps in science and innovation, impacting the structure of our traditional industries. To these, I would add a range of subjects which support our efforts in new domains like banking and our higher aims in the area of social impact like climate change and sustainability. Now I come to the M of VSMD, denoting the mindset and the culture of the profession required in a world of rapid change and uncertainty. This is the most elusive and yet the most critical component of our strategy. We want to promote and bring out more explicitly the following qualities in our profession: courage, curiosity, adaptability, judgment, imagination, and the growth mindset. The growth mindset is a specific psychological term which embraces perseverance, experimentation, and continuous learning. Our positioning as a brand and as a profession must change. We must have the wisdom and the self-awareness to realize that our culture is our creation, and they are a manifestation of our behaviors and practices accumulated over the years. We must be bold in going beyond the practices and processes which are unhelpful or which stand in our path. We must remember what Frank Reddington advised us more than 50 years ago. We must not be weighed down by our besetting virtues of accuracy, cautiousness, consistency, and reticence. We must make room for new ones: courage, curiosity, adaptability, judgment, imagination, and the growth mindset. We must promote, exemplify, and celebrate these new values, profile these values, encourage these values, and attract new members with these values. If we do all this consistently over the next 2 to 3 years and make sure they stay in the foreground in our council and management meetings and in all our deliberations, we will create the flywheel for change. Changing mindsets and culture is not easy, but it's possible. In our case, it is urgent and necessary. We have a compelling reason to change. It is the only way we can secure our future. Let us do this with courage and imagination. Now I come to the D of the VSMD, denoting domains. This is a call for an open imaginative, and creative exploration of the domains we can work in and influence, given who we are and our DNA. We want to be recognized as actuaries and analytical problem solvers, not only in our core fields, but also across a wide range of domains, wherever our unique attributes can add value. Actuaries are already moving into spaces beyond traditional fields. For example, in banking, health ecosystems, fintech, technology and consulting firms, and many more. We must also recognize that the rise of artificial intelligence and data science will create many new and exciting roles within our traditional domains. We must support our actuaries in seizing these opportunities with confidence. So with this, I've given you the highlights of our VSMD strategy. Our VSMD strategy applies internationally as we seek to nurture our rising influence in Southeast Asia, India, China, and Africa. The IFoA will strive to meet our members' expectations, regardless of their location, domain, or career stages. We have to remind ourselves that whilst we are immensely proud of our British heritage, we are a global organization. This is especially pertinent today, as almost one half of the IFoA total membership are based outside the UK. The VSMD strategy speaks to both our heritage and our future. It is a narrative that speaks to our desire to be a learned society, providing thought leadership at the heart of public interest. A narrative which supports the exploration of social issues of our time and help us make a difference in this world. A narrative, regardless of whether you are UK-based or Africa-based or Asia-based, you can commit to. A narrative, regardless of whether you are working in life or health insurance, in pensions or in risk management, in general insurance or in fintech, in investments or in banking, in management consultancies or in regulatory bodies, you can subscribe to. Because this is a narrative about how our common DNA as actuaries can be applied in many, many different ways. I will be publishing a longer version of this VSMD strategy as an appendix to my speech. Now I would like to draw your attention to the bigger world beyond the IFoA and talk about thought leadership. Our current professional practice is anchored on neoclassical economics and its belief in rationality and efficiency of markets, and that risk is best measured by short-term volatility of asset prices. This has produced a focus on short-term outcomes at the expense of value and sustainability in the long term. We have an incentive culture which exacerbates inequality and thrives on information asymmetry of opaque products. Our probabilistic risk models do not capture the uncertainties inherent in the complex adaptive systems we live in. Our emphasis on capital efficiency and productivity has reduced our resilience as a society. Our preoccupation with growth has come at an unacceptable price to our environment. A lot of what we do is precious: professionalism, integrity, technical competence and compliance, and ethics. But in themselves, they are not sufficient. Effectiveness and diligence are unhelpful if they operate within an unsound paradigm or are directed at a wrong or too narrow a purpose. As individual actuaries or as individual agents, we may be making the right or correct decision within a regulatory framework. But what use is that if the framework is resting on multiple fault lines? We pride ourselves as risk professionals, but how can we be effective risk managers and make financial sense of the future when we cannot make sense of the present? If we are advising on risk in a system which is unsustainable, and if we do not call this out, I put it to you, we are not doing our job. We must speak out as our actuaries code requires us to do. The regulatory system and the financial sector have a social purpose, but regulatory unintended consequences and the financial sector's shortcomings are now a matter of extensive public debate. The IFoA and the profession can be braver and have a stronger voice and use our influence to help reform the system. These societal questions are questions our professions cannot ignore. We must engage more widely and more confidently to influence reforms. We must truly step outside our shadows. But in the same breath and with humility, let us not pretend we have all the answers. We do not, but we can help to rethink the questions through the long-term and risk management lens, which are our unique strengths and which characterize the history and tradition of our beloved profession. Members of the IFoA, this is not a choice. This is our obligation. This will be a large, collective, and long-term effort. It is not just about economic theories and their assumptions. It is about culture. It is about anthropology. It is about navigating between the small world thinking and the large world thinking. It is about complex adaptive systems. It is about risk. It is about uncertainty. It is about how actuaries can bring judgment to bear. It is about reimagining what can be deemed possible. We must encourage and bring into the foreground thought leadership in many paradigms: climate change and sustainability, new economics, artificial intelligence and ethics, systems thinking, uncertainty and judgment. All these are interlinked. We truly have to navigate across the paradigms. We need to engage debate with all parts of the IFoA, design a research agenda to fit our purpose, and be more assertive in our regulatory and policy impact. Our social purpose and our position on environmental, social, and governance issues must be central to our actuarial thinking and be fully integrated into the profession and our education. For this to happen, there's a strong need for a change in our mindset. We must believe our views matter. We must stand up and be counted. We need to be braver. We must argue for changes in the name of public interest. We must believe that our mathematics enable us to work within the system, but our capability and judgment oblige us to work on the system, only then can we call ourselves professionals. I would like to make a call today to re-engage actuaries who have felt the IFoA has lost our way in this regard. I invite these actuaries to come forward to participate more actively in the revival of thought leadership in the profession. Please be prepared to step forward to do for the profession what you expect the profession to do for you. I will do as Jeffrey Haywood declared in his 1972 presidential address, to give the Institute leadership directed with all the energy which I'm able to muster towards this effort. In closing, I would like to summarize the 5 pillars we need to pursue with thought, care, and urgency. 1, we revive the spirit of a learned society and bring thought leadership to the foreground. 2, we implement the VSMD strategy with pace and urgency. 3, we encourage the IFoA executive team, led by Stephen Mann, to accelerate their cultural transformation. 4, we reappraise with courage and imagination the governance arrangements of the IFoA. 5, as a profession, we embark on a cultural transformation to create room for courage, curiosity, adaptability, judgment, imagination, and the growth mindset. Members of the IFoA, we are at an inflection point. Let us do all this with courage and imagination. And let us remember, the actuary who is only an actuary is not an actuary. The Institute and Faculty of Actuaries is a great professional body. It is our professional body. It is a professional body of actuaries, by actuaries, and for public interest. Yes, the best is yet to come. Thank you for your attention. Good morning and good evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suee Chieh. I think that was a very inspiring address. And I say that not just because it's my opinion, but because many of the comments that we've been seeing in the question column while you've been speaking have been using words like inspired, inspiring, motivating. So you definitely have struck that chord with many of the people who are listening. In a moment, I'm going to take the opportunity for us to try and work through as many of the questions that have come in as possible, but I'll take this opportunity just to remind people how they can ask a question if they want to. So to ask a question, you do need to have previously registered to be viewing the session on Zoom. If you have done that, then you can use the Q&A facility to send us your questions. We're not taking questions directly from either the chat facility or the raise hand function. So please don't use those if you want your question to be picked up. Use the Q&A facility for that. And as I say, we will try and work through as many as we can. There's quite a few that came in even while the President was speaking. So, shall we turn to those Q&As then, Suee Chieh? The first question that I wanted to put to you from the various ones that have come in is you talked in the address obviously about the VSMD strategy, but also it's been clear as the strategy work has been going on and being developed with Council that the importance of culture has kind of more latterly come to the fore as being a particularly significant part of how you see this strategy getting taken forward. And so I just wondered if you could talk to us a bit more about why you think culture is so central to the delivery of the VSMD strategy.
Yes, thank you, Annette. I will talk about it in 3 levels. And if you think of the VSMD strategy, when it first started, we were talking about the domains we work in life and pensions industry. Is the skills applying to those domains. And we were encouraging our actuaries to go into new fields, whether it's health ecosystem or digital science consultancies and so forth. But that is not just about skills, it's about curiosity, it's about adaptability, and it's about the learning or the growth mindset. So that was already embedded in the VSMD strategy. But then when we came into the execution of the VSMD strategy and we realized that the executive team also have to be agile and responsive because the world they live in is the same world as actuaries live in. It's the world of change and uncertainty. And we got to be more curious, more open, and more adaptable to adopt those. But why are we unable to do that? We are unable to do it because of our governance arrangements, which was a product of yesteryears, which was based on the old virtues, the quintessential values of accuracy, consistency, reticence, and cautiousness, which were very valuable and still remain central. But we need to have new room because of the new world which is changing, because the world has become more uncertain. And those governance arrangements have to be altered so to allow the executive to respond very quickly. But where do the governance come from? The governance come from our culture, from our culture of actuaries. So and I think the thunderbolt came to me when I read Reddington's speech, when he talked about the 4 quintessential values of accuracy, cautiousness, consistency, and reticence. We want it to be right. We want it to be complete. We want it to be consistent, and we are careful. And that is very important. But he did ask us to create more space and more diversity for new styles of thinking, new perspectives to come in, and that will make our profession thrive. So it came very strongly in the foreground in the last 3 or 4 months.
Thank you. That's really helped to explain why you think the culture is so central. I've got a couple of follow-up questions on that that have come in, suggestions actually for kind of actions that you might want to take. So the questions are you planning to create an IFoA culture transformation task force? I think maybe they're thinking about the way that the task force on COVID-19 has been so effective. So a question about whether we should have a task force for culture transformation, and also a similar question suggesting would it be a good idea to have VSMD ambassadors? So I just wondered what you think about those suggestions.
I will tackle the second question first. We need advocates, ambassadors, and there are many words for it, because in any change process, you have people who are champions and advocates, and then there will be people who are supporters. We need about 20 to 30% who are strong advocates for this change, and they will be exemplars. And then the supporters will come in, yeah. And then and we will have in any change process, you will have people who find it slower to adopt. So we need to create a powerful coalition for change. I'm more skeptical about using the word task force, yeah, because culture change is not about task force, it's about mindsets. And the people at the top of the profession should lead and exemplify in the things they do on a day-to-day basis. It's not about let's have a tough source meeting and therefore let's exhibit curiosity. Yeah, it's not about that. It's about being curious. It's about inventive. It's about challenging the rules. It's about asking what else is possible, yeah, in that spirit, and to catch us ourselves doing it. That is more powerful than to set up task force with minutes. I don't think we want to do that. And I've seen regulatory bodies not too far from where I am, who tried to set up cultural task force, but I don't think it works that way, because culture is something you do and live. And I'm fundamentally optimistic that we have enough people at the right places to encourage this change.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for being clear on those 2 points. I'm going to pick up also on something that you said in your first answer, and something that you talked about in a number of places in the address, which is this need for change in governance. We've had a few questions come in around this. I think largely what people are asking is what do you think is wrong with the current governance? And I suppose more specifically, can you tell people more about what changes you expect to see happen during your presidential term?
Yes, I think our practice boards and corporate boards need to be more responsive to the members and work more easily with each other. I think that we are still thinking through, but I think there is a consensus at a senior level that this one needs to be looked at quite urgently. And these are not constitutional changes. These are changes in our working arrangements, so practice boards and corporate boards. For instance, I think that they don't have to have a consensus before they move a decision, and they can disagree, and we could be more creative as a result, as long as it's framed properly. I also felt, and this is probably more personal and less widely shared, that the size of the council, in my view, is too big in terms of having meaningful conversations. So we've got to make it sure that it works better. And I felt that sometimes decision-making is too diffuse across the IFoA. Consequently, it's hard to act. And that is fine, because it produces an essence and value in collaboration. And that might be the right answer in a world where changes are slow. Yeah, but when changes are quick and digital and radical, you need something which is more responsive. So in many instances, and I suppose the online exams is a very good example. Yeah, there was an oversight committee working with management board, quickly made a decision, because that was how it needed to be made that quickly, because there was a burning platform. Either we do it quickly or we don't do it at all. Yeah, so we can learn from that. The COVID-19 Actuaries Response Group did not want to be a working party because it would take too long to agree the terms of reference. So they went ahead and do things, but they were very careful to make sure whatever they do brings credit to the profession and complies with the Actuaries Code. So we should encourage such experimentation, such diversity, and also I think we should have a culture that it's okay to get it wrong on some things, because in the world of digital experimentation, it's very important. In fact, you're encouraged to fail in many instances in a digital world. But that is not the culture of the four quintessential values, because in that world, structured data and in a more stable world, you want to get things right. Yeah, so you really need a mix of the two.
So it sounds as though, in summary, what you're saying is we need a much more simplified system. And I particularly like the fact that you're encouraging actuaries to embrace the concept of fast failure. I think you're absolutely right. That's a very good way for us to evolve more quickly. So I'm continuing to just keep scanning the questions as they're coming in. So I'm just going to try and work out where we're going to go next. I think actually I'm going to ask one of the key questions that has come in a couple of times, which is, I mean, obviously, you know, a very inspiring address and quite a lot of big ideas in there. One of the questions is kind of what are the tangible measures of success? So in 12 months' time, what things would you want to have seen done that would make you feel that it was moving in the right direction? How are you going to measure whether we've done this or not?
I think the most measurable one will be on skill sets. We have already formed a committee called Project Moonshot. Yeah, the whole idea is to have a curriculum offering which captures the content and the spirit of the skill sets. So I would think that if we have a number of modular programs on banking and climate change, and an insertion of data science into the associateship curriculum. I would see that as progress. And I also think that the data science certificate, which John Taylor launched, to have a wider, actually the take up, the number of people interested in it is very high, so that we could actually process them and admit them more quickly into new streams. That would be important. Those would be specific ones. The other ones would be on mindset, and here mindsets are harder to measure, but the mindset will hopefully unleash our responsiveness and our originality in ideas, and that will be manifested in many things we do, like the exploration of domains, and also exploration of domains, and also in terms of altering some of our governance arrangements.
Okay, so there is actually kind of a list of some quite tangible things that, like a checklist in 12 months' time, where you can say, have we done these things? Okay, I think that will really help people who've been listening to be able to track our progress against this. There was a kind of related question that that talked about the fact that this is obviously quite an ambitious plan, if you like, that you're setting out, but that actually your presidential term is only a year long, and actually a question for you about whether you think the presidential term should be longer. So you can tell me whether you want to address that particular question or not. But I think fundamentally a question about how much of this and how much of what you just outlined as the tangible deliverables can be done within your presidential term.
Louise Pryor, who is my successor, is very aligned. We are both very aligned with one another. We have been working on VSMD and on thought leadership for the last 18 months or 2 years. And I knew her from 35 years ago. We were very aligned and we supported each other. So there will be continuity into Louise's term. Stephen Mann and Graham Stott are very signed up to this strategy. So I don't see any likelihood of it being of substantial deviation, and I hope that the successor to Louise will also be committed supporter of this strategy. My personal opinion, but this is something which I do not have a monopoly of the answer being correct. Not for me, but for future presidents, I would think that a 2-year term would be better, so that they can actually pursue their agenda over a longer term. But while we can work with what we have, certainly for my term and for Louise's term, whether we have the interest and the desire to alter those arrangements, that has to be thought through very carefully.
Okay, it's a very clear answer. Thank you very much. I'm going to move us into a kind of different type of question, a number of questions that we've had that, if you like, are maybe a little bit more about either the concepts you described or some of the implications of those concepts. So I'm going to start on thinking about what you said about growth mindsets. I'm kind of distilling a number of questions here, but do you think a growth mindset can be learned or developed, or actually is it something that is a bit innate in people that you either have it or you don't? So, you know, can people learn this growth mindset if they don't think they have it at the moment?
One of a human being's greatest endowment is the ability to choose what they want to believe in. Yeah, and I got the quote from Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and that is a unique skill of our species. We can choose to believe. We have the ability to choose what we want to believe in, and the person who coined the word growth mindset is Carol Dweck, and I had a good fortune to be her student 20 years ago at Columbia, and she taught the fixed mindset and the incremental mindset. It was called incremental at that time. And why teenagers went on to succeed, because they have a sense of mastery, and those who remain stuck where they are, is the beliefs they choose themselves. I am clever, therefore I don't have to learn. I am not clever, and therefore I will never improve. But those who have a mastery are people who say that learning is the key for my capability. If I fail, this is an opportunity to learn. So this is really true, and I subscribe to it myself, because you can change the world by changing how you think about the world. Yeah. So I am of the school that that is not something you are fixed in. The whole idea is that you're not fixed in your capability, in your ability to grow. I'm a strong believer in that, and I think many of us actuaries are strong believers of that. Yeah, I think we just got to create space in our minds for that.
Okay, thank you. It struck me when you were giving that answer that to the person who is asking, can you learn a growth mindset? In a way, they already have a growth mindset because they're asking what they can learn. So maybe maybe they've kind of answered their own question with that.
Do you mind if I just add a couple more points on this? Because it's not about growing per se. And if you research into Carol Dweck's work, it talks about how we cope with failure. Failure is a good thing because you learn, and how you shouldn't be envious of other people who succeed. Yeah, and also you must experimentation. Yeah, and openness. Yeah, so a whole set of qualities. And to be honest, I think, and there's an issue of perseverance, right? I think actuaries by their nature, because our exams are quite difficult, we have an element of perseverance. We do persevere, otherwise we will not succeed. But we shouldn't believe that we are fixed. We believe they are fixed, we then will be fixed in the box where we are. And the whole idea of the strategy is that we don't think of the box we are in, we think of our capabilities. And our capabilities is our DNA, our love for mathematics, and our ability to apply. And I think that this is increasingly indispensable. In a digital world, what we learn, if you have a 100-year life, what you learn at the age of 20, in 40 years time, in 60 years, and you got another 40 years to live, it's not going to be very relevant. You really got to believe in lifetime learning, right? Lifelong learning, because it's not a cliche. Lifelong learning, you really got to do it. And I think as actuaries, we could treat it as fun, rather than see it as an examination thing, right? Treat it as fun.
Thank you. That's a really helpful kind of addition. I'm going to ask you a couple of regulatory questions. I hope that's okay. So we had a very interesting question which said that there is increasingly quite a heavy regulatory oversight, quite a prescriptive regime, if you like, particularly in many insurance sectors, certainly in markets like the UK, but I think increasingly we're seeing that in other parts of the world as well. And the question is whether you see this as a constraint on the kind of responsiveness and approach that you've been talking about, or whether you see it as an opportunity to be able to try and shape and evolve the way that regulators are thinking about the kind of work that actuaries do as well. So I think as a kind of question about whether regulation is a constraint or an opportunity in the context of your strategy.
I see it as an opportunity, and I think it's a constraint too. So the whole idea, and I think you've got to look at, let's take the UK as an example, but that is a mirror of many economies, right? Actuaries are increasingly doing a lot of risk calibration and quantification. And I've said to risk management committees with 800 pages of report, 1,000 pages of report, based on probabilistic risk models, which are correct within that small world of risk theory. And Northern Rock, which is a building society in UK, was considered AAA a few weeks before it collapsed, partly because within the system they are correct, but beyond that system they have liquidity issues, and there were a lot of uncertainties which is not captured in statistical distribution. We have gone more prescriptive, but it doesn't add wisdom to it. And in this regard, I have been quite influenced by the writings of Mervyn King, who was the ex-bank of governor of Bank of England, who talked about uncertainties which is outside our system. So actuaries are very good in both worlds, yeah. And I think we got to extend our branches into the bigger world. In a smaller world, we are doing the quantification within the rules set up by regulation. But the regulation may not be operating in the best interest of the industry, in the interest of our customers, yeah, which is really important. We are selling products to our customers which are sometimes very opaque. where the cost is too high. And I said through a discussion yesterday on the great risk transfer, we are transferring risk to our customers, and our customers don't really know how to make decisions. Many of our customers make decisions on those risk transfer, and institutions should be managing on their behalf. But we are transferring those risks to protect our balance sheet, and that is not quite right. So this is one example. The other example is on climate change, and our emphasis on growth and productivity. So we've got a lot of big issues. So we must be ambidextrous. We have actuaries who are employed by companies, and the companies are also, I just saw a letter to the Prime Minister from UK, from many people who are signatories, about pursuing UN ESG. So we should pursue that kind of influence. But within our world, we still got to do our work. So we got to be fairly ambidextrous. But my orientation is that we should encourage the profession to speak up more courageously about shaping regulatory regimes. So we are not just a rule taker, we are a contributor to the rules as well.
Yes, and I thought when you were talking about thought leadership as well, you know, you touched on the relationship between the principles on which much regulation is based and actually whether or not the thinking that's based on is still relevant. So it does strike me that you know, there's a bias in what you're saying towards saying there's the opportunity to shape it. Kind of related question, which is a question from someone saying, do you think that our current regulatory arrangements, so I think they're talking here about the way that the IFoA regulates its members, particularly in the UK, and also the way that the FRC regulates the IFoA, do you have a view on whether those regulatory arrangements are appropriate?
I would like to give a more considered answer to that, partly because I have not spent enough time on this, but I have heard enough from our members on TAS 100 Technical Actuarial Standards and its application, especially outside life and pensions, that it might be too heavy-handed. And also, where does the whole philosophy sits, in terms of regulatory systems? And there I would borrow a leaf from what Mervyn King, who until recently was the governor, who said that we are not really catching the right risk. Say, for instance, in pensions, you know, we'll be worried about funding, but what about covenant risk, right? Which is really outside our domain, but actually will have impact on our customers, on the members of the pensions. Yeah. But I think it's an area which I'm happy to learn more. And I know that Neil Buckley is also thinking about it, along with some of our council members on the regulatory board, Andrew Rea and Matt Secker and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it is an area that needs a lot of consideration. I just want to make sure I'm asking you some of the difficult questions that are coming in, as well as the easy ones. Let's move into some of, if you like, the broader questions. I'm lumping a few together here. So there's a few questions that are about the extent to which you think, or the way in which you would plan that your strategy would reflect cultural differences. So you talked about what an international organisation the IFoA has become. You are obviously the first Asian president. So there are kind of questions about to what extent you think there are differences in different parts of the world in relation to the strategy you outlined. And also a question which is kind of related about how we might increase awareness about the actuarial profession and actuarial skills as a whole into those wider fields. And particularly a suggestion that in some parts of the world, actuaries are still seen as very much just being in traditional fields. So there's quite a lot in there, but I think it's really about cultural and geographic differences or similarities, and how you're approaching that aspect.
No, I think that is a multifaceted question. And I think that the first one, I do not see any differences when we apply the values, the values across the profession. But I'm very conscious that we have very different culture in Asia, in Netherlands, or in Africa, and all cultures are different. and especially in the practice of something like the Actuaries Code, say for speaking up, or the conflict between loyalty and objectivity. Yeah? So those differences do show up. But in the areas of courage, adaptability, and so forth, I suppose different cultures will have different take on this. But fundamentally, they are still a question of tilt. Yeah? It's not that you change completely, it's a tilt. Yeah? So that's what I would say so far. But in terms of promoting roles in different domains, I think the idea that we should profile the people who are successful in different domains, whether they're in banking or fintech companies, and we have actuaries working in those areas. We should give them more airtime and encourage them to have members interest group. And I recall there was a blog written up on how to help actuaries to transfer their careers, transfer their how to manage their career changes. So we could encourage them. But there will be a group of us who will prefer to work in the stability of an existing field. And that's fine. It's called diversity. Yeah. So we are not saying that we're all going to be working in fintech. I don't mean that. I think we just want to open up the possibilities. There'll be some of us who will quite enjoy the analytical work, and they are difficult and important analytical work. And we need to have many of them doing that, not just in the UK, across the world. But we must also be mindful that we must open opportunities for people in those companies, because even if you have Prudential, Aviva, XR, there are many changes within those companies. You just got to know much more in terms of digital, consideration of digital or sustainability, because it's the language of our time. So it's important for them, but also important for those who are working outside those traditional domains.
Okay, I think that's been a really good answer, and I think that will have addressed quite a few different kinds of questions that have come in. So hopefully different people have recognised bits of their question and your answer in what you've just said. We've had a few questions also asking about the extent to which you think that this would be more powerful, if you like, if we worked more closely with other associations. So really asking your views about whether and how we should work more closely with other actuarial associations, and perhaps particularly those global or supranational bodies like the International Actuarial Association and the Actuarial Association in Europe and so on. So I think it's really a question about how do you see collaboration with other associations to take VSMD forward?
Collaboration with other professional organizations is one of our cardinal principles. Yeah, so we will definitely work with other professional organizations without doubt, right? And that has been our history, and that is in fact one of the underpinning guiding principles of the council when we set off this strategy. So that one is not in doubt. How to, in what way, I think is questions. I think we are also in exploration with many of the bodies even today. But I suppose the real challenge is a trade-off in terms of speed, yeah, about what you want to do. And I think that we're probably quite happy to share what we have, yeah. But the speed of execution is a consideration, yeah. And I think that we got to think of it as an ecosystem, because the world is an ecosystem, yeah. Some of us are going to move differently because of a different industry, and we are going to do it at different speeds. And I think it's okay. It doesn't mean that we're not collaborating. But I think our mindset is an international one.
Okay, but it's about making sure we keep the pace, but we have that principle of collaboration. I guess there's a question about whether there's another profession you would look at that you think is already doing the kind of thing that you think actuaries should be doing really well. So is there a profession that we can look to kind of inspire us or give us ideas about how to do this?
I have to think about that. Yeah, I have to think about that. I think all professions are under threat. Yeah, I can think of lawyers. I can think of news journalists. I can think of accountants. I can think of radiographers. All the professions are under threat by digital, because our whole paradigm is anchored on a print-based society, but we are moving to a digital society. And a digital society is not just a transfer of knowledge. The characteristics of digital knowledge in the way it is democratized, the way it is peer review and increased, and the multiplicative effects is such that and then you couple with that with AI, it's just going to be big. And no one can really tell how the professions have evolved. And in that regard, I'm quite influenced by the books written by Susskind, father and son's team, Richard and Daniel Susskind, about the future of the profession. And I think the only thing which can guarantee our future is our mindset. So lawyers, especially those who are in doing conveyancing and all that, clearly I can't see it existing in the years to come. There are many things, but change is not going to come immediately, but it will come. I suppose one good example I could give, which I've lived through, was when Steve Jobs came with his iPod in 2005. It was fine. Tower Records was there, HMV was there, Virgin Records was there. But 8 years later, they were gone. 8 years later, they were gone. But for the first 3 years, they were fine. They were still busy. Suddenly, it was not sustainable. So change has a very funny feel about it. It occurs very slowly, and then it happens very quickly. And I can see that happening, right? I can see it. And I lived through, say, industrial assurance. When I joined Prudential, I used to remember doing all the charts for IB business. It's called the IB business, industrial branch. And this is a man from the Pru collecting £1 per week or whatever per 4 weeks from all the householders in the UK. But when I was in Singapore in 1998, about 15 years later, the business was closed down. But it was such a huge business at that time. But it was 15 years. And then it was nothing to do with digital. It was to do with bank gyro. So it can happen quickly.
Okay, so I think more about looking at examples and being aware of the speed of change, but not necessarily an individual profession. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, but I think I've got time to get a couple more questions in. So it's clear from the Q&A panel that I'm looking at that we have some of our lay members who serve on some of our boards have obviously also been keen to hear what you had to say. And one or two of them have been asking, I think in relation to particularly how you're talking about governance and how you're talking about taking the strategy forward, what do you see as the role of the lay member in terms of how they help and support taking the profession forward? What's the role of the lay person?
Very important. I have met many lay chairmen and lay members. They add tremendous value to our deliberations. We just got to make sure that their contribution is aligned to the shared contracts of the organization. And that is the issue. I've been to different boards and I sense that the conversation is slightly different from the other conversation in the management board and also in the council. And if they don't get the complete picture, they would be unable to contribute in a way we want them to contribute. I know Helen Wright very well. I'm not sure she asked that question. She chairs the Life Learning Board. And we spend a lot of time together to talk about VSMD, but her board needs to have the whole sense of the evolution, for instance. That is important. But again, I'm reasonably new. I see the world according to my limited views. There might be other views. So I think it's a question we need to explore openly. And I'm really grateful to Graham Stott in this regard because he saw the issues. And I think I think we got to be open to accept that if there's an issue, we can solve them. I'm sure we can solve them. I think we are all in agreement that there is a problem. So we solve them because we are all quite creative. So, and I think there is a new energy to do that. But lay members are important because again, it's about diversity. But we got to ask the question, are we using them well enough? So I've been on the market development board as well, and we've got great members there. How do we use them better? Better.
Okay, I think that's going to be a very encouraging answer, hopefully both for the actuaries and for the lay members who have been listening in. I'm going to turn to a final question, And again, this weaves together a few different questions that have come in. But you've touched on this a little bit, that obviously a lot of actuaries do still work in traditional fields, despite the rapid increase that we are seeing in new domains and wider fields. And also that, you know, they're quite proud of what they've achieved in these areas. And in a sense, their reputation in those traditional fields is built on managing risk and being cautious. So I think the question is, what is the role of the actuary in traditional fields? And also, how do we make sure that in taking on a more daring and imaginative approach, we don't actually throw away the thing that built actuaries' reputation?
Definitely, and I said in a speech that they are central to IFoA, and in fact, not just in UK, in China, in Malaysia, Singapore, the traditional fields are still the largest employers, and I think those are our bedrock. The strategy is to really create opportunities for people who work in traditional fields, as well as those who are not working in traditional fields. But in the application of regulation, I think we've got to be more imaginative. The rules required for people who work in life and pensions in the UK, are they appropriate for, say, pricing actuaries in GI or fintech companies or some of the directors? Yeah, I think that there has been a bit of a debate about that. So I think it is about the rules must be fit for purpose, yeah. And I do not want members to leave this address thinking that that the work of the traditional fields are unimportant. I come from a traditional fields, yeah. I'm from life insurance in UK, yeah, and also life and health insurance in income. But I realize that conversations are changing, and there are different shades of actuaries. There are those who quite enjoy doing the more predictable stuff, yeah, and they're doing it really well. And there are some who are more managerial. So if you look at those who are more managerial, even in big companies like AIA, FWD, Aviva, they are more curious, they are more communicative. So it's not really either or, it's really a bell curve. For me, I'm suggesting that we are more open. But I suppose the more important point for me is that when we make decisions at council or at IFoA, we just got to make sure that our natural orientation does not flow through to try to do things in a complete, perfect, and consistent and without errors, you know. And consequently, our rules, our minutes, our process could be more than necessary to keep the governance going. Yeah. So I think this is the part where could be smarter, because many chairs, I think, and many members, no members have disagreed, or even executives. We are naturally slow, and I don't say that as a criticism of anyone, because we aim to be right and perfect. Yeah, we aim to be right and perfect and complete because we want to be accurate, consistent, cautious, and reticent. So that makes us really check, and I'm really impressed by the quality, but it may not be fit for purpose. Yeah. So this is the part we need to look at to move on. I was part of the COVID-19 response group, and we agreed an idea that it is a beta version. We will never aim at a perfect version. Any computer software pushed out by Google is a beta version. So our documents, you can find a mistake or can improve on, but we are going to get it out by this Friday. So it's a beta version after all. So I think we got to think like that. Yeah.
That seems like a very good note for us to end on. And those who are watching the clock will have seen that we are sadly also out of time. I'm just going to take this opportunity actually to remind everyone who is attending that we will be publishing the full text of Suee Chieh's address, and also the appendix that he referred to in terms of more detail about the VSMD strategy. And I believe we're also publishing the slides that were used during the address. So they should be available on the IFoA's website very shortly. You just need to give us a few minutes to get it posted up once this session ends. So for those of you who want to go back and reread it, or indeed share it with other people, that will be a way that you can do that. I think that means that all that is remaining for me to do now is, on behalf of all of you who have been attending, to thank Tan Suee Chieh for this very inspiring, motivating, I've seen visionary as well, all kinds of fantastic words being used to describe what we have heard this morning. We've tried to answer as many of the questions that came in as possible, and I'm sorry if we didn't get to everything, but you know, I think this is probably the start of quite a long dialogue. Suee Chieh has obviously given a call to arms to actuaries everywhere to play their part in taking the profession forward for the digital age. I personally look forward to seeing up close the progress that we're going to make during your presidential term, and hopefully to be able to play a part in supporting that work. But basically, I think what remains is simply for me to thank everyone who has taken the time to listen in to us today, whether on Zoom or on YouTube. But most of all, Mr. President, thank you.
You're most welcome. Thanks, Annette.